began with education. It starts with me shifting the cultural climate through the study and practice of Kingian nonviolence. This was the King Center's theme for 2024, a year that began with education, service, inspiration, and celebration in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 95th birthday.
In 2024, the King Center reached over 100,000 youth nationally and 8,000 globally. 46 students, including 20 international students, successfully completed the 2022 to 2024 Beloved Community Leadership Academy cohort. 55 young women embarked on their journey with the Empower program, a Beloved Community Leadership Academy program sponsored by the Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women Initiative.
Me coming here today, I've learned how to present myself in a business setting.
We were on mission and shifting culture in 2024. 150 City of Atlanta interns were equipped by our Nonviolence 365 Leadership Development Workshops. 500 Global King Center Institute students enrolled in the Nonviolence 365 online masterclass.
Dr. King's philosophy and his work plays a key role in the current work that I'm doing because fighting child poverty, especially in Africa, is no easy.
We were excited to announce the Emerging Dreamers College Student Roundtable and Program launch in partnership with the WNBA's Atlanta Dream.
I feel like all of us together owe it to Dr. King and to the King Center for putting this program together.
With the sponsorship and partnership of Microsoft, the King Center advanced the digital preservation of its archives, which, along with its library, comprises the largest repository of primary source materials on Dr. King and the American Civil Rights Movement.
This year, we showcased our beloved community culture. We led the way in transforming the landscape with our courageous conversations. 1,004 volunteers dedicated a remarkable 7,565 hours of their time.
I want to really, from the bottom of my heart, thank all the teachers, all the volunteers, all the sponsors, everybody that have something to do with it, and the world would change because of what you're doing.
Now, more than ever, we need Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s beloved community worldview, love-centered nonviolent strategy, and global perspective.
You have a responsibility to continue the freedom struggle in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in our world house. I'm Bernice A. King, CEO of the King Center, and I am honored to welcome you to Be Love Day 2025. Each year, we gather not merely to commemorate, but to commit, to reflect deeply, and to act boldly, to reaffirm the power of love, the urgency of justice, and yes, the truth of our shared humanity. Be Love Day is more than a moment on the calendar. It is a call to live differently, to live with courage, compassion, and even conviction. It reminds us that love is not just a feeling, it's a force, a powerful, transformative force that can heal wounds, restore dignity, and shift the very trajectory of our world. My father, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., taught us that power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love, correcting everything that stands against love. That's what Be Love Day represents. It's a movement rooted in love, not the soft or passive kind of love, but the kind that demands justice, the kind that holds us accountable, and the kind that invites us to see each other, truly see each other as human beings worthy of dignity. We invite you to hear and be ready to heed those call to actions that you will hear throughout this day. Now, this evening, we will engage in a very important beloved community talks with a focus on immigration through the lens of humanity. We will discuss and dissect what has happened to our brothers and sisters who are immigrants, and then be challenged to direct our energies and efforts to encourage compassionate action toward them. Even more broadly, Be Love Day asks us to confront all of the ways our society has failed to love, failed to honor human dignity, and calls us back to a higher moral ground. We are living in a time where division has been normalized, where fear often replaces empathy, and where the dignity of our neighbors near and far is too often ignored. But Be Love Day says we can choose another way. We can choose love over apathy and hate, unity over exclusion, and peace, yes, over polarization. Let us remember what my father so clearly warned. He said, we must learn, keyword, to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will be forced to perish together as fools. So Be Love Day is not just an observance, it's an invitation to recommit to building the world house my father envisioned, where people of every race, religion, and nation share in the work of peace, justice, and mutual respect. So let us not leave this day inspired but unchanged. Let us carry the message of Be Love into our homes, our schools, our workplaces, our government and corporate policies and practices, in our villages, our communities, and nations throughout the world, and I dare say, even in our music and entertainment industries. May we be the builders of the beloved community, not in theory, but in action. Not someday, but now. Let us not wait for peace to arrive. Let us become instruments of it. In the words of St. Francis of Assisi, let us all declare, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, let me have faith. Where there is despair, let me have hope. Where there is darkness, let me be light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, and to be loved as to love. So welcome to Be Love Day 2025. May it awaken your conscience and ignite something in you far beyond this moment. A sincere and deep commitment to justice, dignity, and love for all. Please take the Be Love Pledge at thekingcenter.org and join us in the movement to create the beloved community where injustice ceases and, yes, love prevails.
Birmingham was a place where they put the movement into song. There were some of the best voices. And I mean, everybody loved to sing. Every mass meeting, the first half hour was nothing but singing freedom songs. And that would not only get you emotionally worked up to overcome your fears, but it would get you inspired and courageous to make you want to do something about your fears and not give in to them.
So my brothers and my sisters, as we embrace this urgency of creating the beloved community, now is the time to be love. Love means understanding, redemptive goodwill toward all which seeks nothing in return. So be love by implementing the demands of justice to eliminate the school to prison pipeline that has so many black children entrapped. Be love by correcting voting policies that seek to suppress the votes of millions of black and brown people. Be love and implement the demands of justice by transforming a society that is disproportionately violent toward black lives, including black transgendered lives and indigenous lives. Be love and correct false narratives and economic policies that continue to divide and pit poor and working class black and white people against each other. Be love and implement demands of justice where systems and structures are deconstructed and lead the way of living in community that reimagines just, humane, equitable, and sustainable policies, practices, and behaviors. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them who hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and abuse you. Be love and do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with our God.
I'm Dr. Bernice A. King.
And I'm Dr. Kimberly P. Johnson.
And we are the co-authors of
It Starts With Me. Well, it starts with me.
No, I think it really starts with me.
No.
Well, maybe it just starts with you.
It starts with you.
This is a book for children and the rest of the world about love. A powerful word that really can change and transform our world. Now, this girl here is Amora. So Amora is going to take us on a journey around the world with her friends, talking about how we can be loved.
Thank you so much for reading this book, It Starts With Me. Dr. King's vision is coming to life, and you guys are going to carry that vision into the world. Have fun reading.
We want our children and you, parents, to be loved in the way you speak, in the way you act, and in the way you think. That's what it starts with me. It starts with me. I am the one who infects the world with love.
It starts with me.
When I think about love, I think of belonging. I think of soul, and I think of knowing. I pledge to be love. I choose to be love by challenging injustice, and I choose to be love by promoting peace. But I'm not perfect, so I choose to try to be as loving as I can under all circumstances. But once again, I'm human, and so I do get upset over a lot of different things that are going on. But I choose love, and you can too. Thank you.
When I think about love, I think about my faith, my peoples, and compassion. I pledge to be love. I choose to be love every day by owning the responsibility to challenge injustice. I choose to be love by promoting true peace, which, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, includes justice. I choose to be love by employing love and light to disrupt and drive out hate and darkness. I choose to be love. You can too. Take the King Center Be Love pledge today at thekingcenter.org/belove.
The King Center, founded by Coretta Scott King, is the official institution of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, championing and developing nonviolent leaders. In 2024, we impacted over 100,000 youth, equipped 150 interns, and trained over 2,000 leaders in nonviolent strategies. Join King 100 as we build King Center 2.0, empower 500,000 youth, and train 1 million individuals on Nonviolence 365. Join the movement at thekingcenter.org. Text MLKGIVE to 44321.
My expectations for today are to have a lot of fun and to learn a lot.
I'm really excited to just learn a lot of history and make connections today.
My expectations for today are really just to be able to know about the history and honor the lives and legacy of the great leaders that have come before us.
I want you to just prepare your minds and prepare your hearts, because you're going to the cradle of the civil rights movement where it all began.
We are in the great state, Alabama, and we are about to get started.
I've seen the videos of the history, but to actually be in person, to see these historical sites and to read and witness the figures, the historical figures that were part of this movement, that were part of us, of our freedom. That is inspiring, and I can't wait to see it.
What I'm looking forward to this trip, like Sandra said, looking at this historical figures, but also just being able to be in person and learn new things that maybe the history books didn't talk about.
The King Center legacy continues!
This experience to both of these museums it had me speechless. Of course, we've all learned this in AP History or AP African Studies, but just coming to these museums in general, it really had me in tears.
Like, what really got me was when we were walking through and we saw the statues of the people in the sand. That's what really made me tear up first, because knowing that we had to be in those tight ships when we were dying from disease and famine and just the brutal causes, and it was justified because they thought of us as we were inferior.
While at the memorial, I decided to count all of the stones that were from Georgia specifically. I had counted around 247 stones itself. Around average, each stone had about maybe 5 people at least, 20 people most. Timing 20 with 247, that would be around 4,920 names.
This is what needs to be seen, because then as we reflect, as we go forth with this in our heart, we can then change that narrative and make sure to personify these people who lost their lives while they were enslaved, as well as ourselves.
This is not Black history, this is American history, the United States of America history. And you've got to tell this to your family, your friends. You've got to educate this oral education like we did in Africa when we were young. It has to be there because our system is trying to wipe this out.
We already did a reflection at lunch on the first half, and so now we're going to talk about your experience at Dexter, what you learned.
From slavery, from segregation to police brutality, we still got a lot to develop and learn about not only our history, but learn about how we came and how we come together.
Yes, we can implement our ideas and we can talk about them and want to do it, but it's one thing to actually do it, and seeing that our leaders did that and that we can do that and we're the next generation, that at this point, I don't want to sit down and not do nothing.
Right. 2 different women, powerful women in their own right, who were part of what we call, when we do our education and training, 2 different campaigns of the movement, born at 2 separate generations, but were young people like you, younger than most of you in this room.
It was when I was 8 years old, growing up in the Selma civil rights movement, when my life was changing without me really even knowing it. Growing up in the midst of experiencing racial discrimination, violence, tears.
But we heard those conversations, we heard about what was going on, and we wanted to be a part of something that led toward what we used to call the freedom of our people. That was Mrs. Park's message. And so at 11 and 12 years old, I was knocking on doors, asking people to go down to register to vote.
You're not too young to join in the fight in the right way, with the proper training. The strategies were used back in the 60s. The Ministry of Nonviolence made a significant difference in terms of the results that happened in the movement.
What I'm telling you is that I had a made-up mind. Like you. He had a made, but we're gonna be in this thing called freedom. Get involved, connect with people, and have people connect with you.
At the Beloved Community Leadership Academy, we are preparing you to be change agents. Say, I'm a change agent for the good. You, the students of the BCLA, are part of a new generation of leaders who will not only reshape the world, but will protect and uplift humanity. You are the pioneers of a new world.
I was in your seats not too long ago. I was surrounded by people who understood how to go into a situation with the mindset of love instead of hate.
So everybody say this after me, say, come and go. Awesome, that's the first type of conflict, all right? Now let's go to the second type of conflict. Everybody say opposite go.
Y'all repeat differing values.
Different values.
Right, and limited resources.
Limited resources.
Those are two of the other common types of conflicts that everybody deals with.
If you can see to your right and to your left, there are sticky posters on the walls that already have a type of conflict. And your responsibility, as Celeste and I yell out these different scenarios, is to go stick a sticky note on the conflict you think we're describing.
Two classmates clashed over their beliefs during a debate on school dress code.
Which one did y'all choose? Different values. Are they right, CB?
They're right. We're going to go on a scavenger hunt, and the scavenger hunt will explain what is on the grounds here.
We invited this amazing panel to come and talk to us a little bit about direct action, as well as the Beloved community and where you guys fit into all of this.
And one of the things that's so unique about Dr. King is that he was able to share truths about people without dehumanizing him.
The goal in a nonviolence campaign is to defeat the injustice, not the people.
How do you prevent retaliating if somebody isn't willing to hear you out or anything? How do you prevent retaliating or coming back?
Retaliation has no place in nonviolence campaigns. Daddy respected people's right to self-defense. He chose a different route in his self-defense, but he respected people having an individual right to self-defense. Self-defense doesn't come into the equation when you're in a nonviolent campaign movement and you're dealing with protest and demonstration.
People always ask me what was Dr. King against, and I'm like, wow, that's a struggle for me because he's a long list of things he may have been against, but what I really know him for is what he was for. You want to be known for, as young people, even when you get older, what you're for, not for what you're against.
We are the Beloved community.
What happened is that some of our philosophers got off base. And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites. So that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. It was this misinterpretation that caused the philosopher Nietzsche, who was the philosopher of the will to power, to reject the Christian concept of love. It was the same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. Now we got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love.
sisters, as we embrace this urgency of creating the beloved community, now is the time to be loved. Love means understanding redemptive goodwill toward all, which seeks nothing in return. So be loved by implementing the demands of justice to eliminate the school to prison pipeline that has so many black children entrapped. Be loved by correcting voting policies that seek to suppress the votes of millions of black and brown people. Be loved and implement the demands of justice by transforming a society that is disproportionately violent toward black lives, including black transgendered lives and indigenous lives. Be loved and correct false narratives and economic policies that continue to divide and pit poor and working class black and white people against each other. Be loved and implement demands of justice where systems and structures are deconstructed and lead the way of living in community that reimagines just, humane, equitable, and sustainable policies, practices, and behaviors. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them who hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and abuse you. Be loved and do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with our God.
Beloved Community Talk. Welcome, my beloved community, and thank you for joining the King Center's Beloved Community Talks from all over the globe. I believe that today's talk will be a powerful start to a very necessary conversation that we as a nation and individuals need to have on the power of unlearning. In 1967, my father left us with a clarion call in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. He stated, amidst revolutionary times, such as we have now, that together we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. I truly believe that learning to unlearn is a critical step in transforming our lives and the world we live in. Now, before I dive into today's conversation, I want to share with you that in 4 days, on June 26th, the King Center will celebrate its 53rd anniversary. 53 years ago, my mother, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, founded the King Center less than 3 months after my father's assassination on April 4th, 1968. About the King Center, this is what she said. Just as at its best, the White House is viewed in the United States as the people's house, the King Center and its offshoots would offer a snapshot of what the beloved community in the World House could become. What a powerful idea. One that undergirds our vision here at the King Center, which we envision the beloved community where injustice ceases and love, that's right, love prevails. The experiences and programs we provide, including our Nonviolence 365 education and training, Camp Now Youth Leadership Academy, soon to be our beloved Community Leadership Academy, Students with King, Beloved Community International Expo, and our beloved community talks, such as the one you are a part of right now, are purposed and designed for us to lead the way in making the beloved community a reality. As my mother said, the beloved community is a realistic vision of an achievable society, one in which problems and, yes, conflicts do exist, but are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. She also stated that in the beloved community, caring and compassion drive political policies that support the worldwide elimination of poverty and hunger and all forms of bigotry and violence. This year, many of you may know that we launched our Be Love campaign, which really is a global movement for justice with the beloved community as its ultimate goal. Be Love includes a virtual Be Love training series and a virtual nonviolence training series. We hope you will join us in this Be Love movement by visiting thekingcenter.org and taking the pledge and then signing up for our trainings. In addition to Be Love, we continue to call people up. That's right, up, not out, to higher places, to nonviolent, constructive, strategic conversations as modeled by our Beloved Community Talks. Beloved Community Talks are courageous conversations, purposed to yield compassionate, nonviolent action that creates the beloved community. Today, I'm excited for this particular Beloved Community Talk about the power of unlearning. I'm joined by a guest who is influencing the world with her art and with her heart for humanity. I'm thrilled to have Lady Gaga, Grammy Award-winning recording artist, join me for the first of what will be a two-part conversation. I hope you will join us next time as well, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of this conversation. This past January, during the King Center's Beloved Community Awards, we presented Lady Gaga with the Yolanda D. King Higher Ground Award. I was, of course, very moved by her remarks about her personal journey and her willingness to admit that she had to unlearn some white supremacy ideologies. I was moved because many people of influence, especially our white brothers and sisters, are fearful about dealing with white supremacy and white privilege, and even more fearful to boldly use their platforms. And even now, this is becoming a great challenge in light of the battle around the critical race theory that is seeking to inhibit, prohibit, and deny the opportunity for schools, public school systems around this country to teach about the linkage between racism and white supremacy and how it impacts us in our systems and structures and policies today. Just recently, we acknowledged the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. And yet, we still find ourselves in polarizing debates regarding this critical race theory. We must all understand and acknowledge there is a great deal of information that is missing or omitted from our history. And from some, a term like unlearning may seem to be antithetical. However, as you will discover through tonight's conversation, unlearning, in fact, is calling on all of us, and I mean each and every one of us, regardless of our race, nationality, and ethnicity, to dismantle false, inaccurate, and harmful information, and replace these thoughts with truth and accurate history that elevates our abilities to understand the painful truths, rich truths, and even triumphs of the past. Unlearning challenges each of us to do our personal and collective work to unlock our own biases or beliefs that keep us from justice, equity, and agape love. Of course, we all have some things we need to learn and unlearn to do our part in creating the beloved community. I welcome each of you to join us on this journey of learning that the power of transformation lies in our willingness to unlearn and dismantle the systems that hinder the creation of the beloved community from being realized. So now let us dive into tonight's conversation as we share a bit of Lady Gaga's incredible journey to unlearning that she shared earlier this year during our Beloved Community Awards.
I believe the beloved community is possible when and if people who look like me, other white people, commit to something I call unlearning. In my core, I feel that I am you and you are me. We are each other. Honesty and kindness are values I live by every day, and it is with these values that I want white people to know that tonight, as I talk about unlearning, I am speaking to you. Black lives matter. Black life matters. Blackness matters. Black joy matters. White people, I believe that Black life represents the best of our nation. And as white people, I believe we have a responsibility to unlearn. to accept the honest truth about the history of our country, admit that white supremacy makes us unhealthy, and change our own behaviors to contribute to a world where freedom is real for everyone. White people, I believe we must right our wrongs without shame. We must change our actions, and we must do this for ourselves. This is just one of our roles in the beloved community.
Wow, that was powerful, that was poignant, and that was potent. I want to take time now to welcome Lady Gaga.
Hello, Dr.
Good evening.
King. Thank you. Good evening. How are you? How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad you are with us, and I'm glad for us to continue conversations we've started before now. And I want to start with this. You said in that same acceptance speech that unlearning is a gift of your life. And so tonight, I'm going to look at this as an opportunity to unwrap that gift to the public for us to experience that journey, because I think you have some personal insight because you've done some very deep work. Just in our conversation that we had on last week, it is very evident that you have been doing some very deep work in this area. And I want people to hear your heart and to go with you on this journey, and perhaps dare to go on that journey themselves. Because as I said earlier, this whole notion of unlearning is not just for any one particular racial group. It's for all of us as a part of humanity, as a part of the beloved community, as a part of what my father called the world house, because white supremacy is something that we were all born into. When we arrived, those systems and structures of operating and believing and thinking and behaving were in place. And we've all been impacted by it in different ways. And so what I want to ask you starting out is, when was that moment for you where the journey really started and you realized that I have a responsibility to unlearn? Because I think most people, the conversation is about learning. You know, my dad, as I said earlier, said we must learn to live together. But the reality is kind of like when you go through a program where you're trying to lose weight, one of the first things that people who are experts in that area try to tell you is that it's important for you to detox first before you really try to introduce all those good foods into your body. And so tell us, when did it all start, that journey? What opened it up for you?
Well, what I would say is, first and foremost, that journey began with a deep, deep desire in my heart to love the world. However, I knew that there were both assumptions made about me and assumptions I made about myself, that I felt that I had already an understanding about equality and fighting for people, for the world. And what I noticed was that when it came to the LGBTQ plus community, I had this endless ability to talk about love, this endless ability to be fearless, this endless ability to dive into myself, to go to Capitol Hill, to yell at the president, "Can you hear me?" Talking about don't ask, don't tell, talking about marriage equality. And then when there was so much racial unrest in this country last summer, I realized that I was having a hard time talking. I was having a hard time knowing what to say. And I realized there was this blockage in me. And people around me were asking me, "What do you think about this? What do you have to say about this? Speak out about this." And at first I thought, I don't want to be too technical. I don't want to speed this up. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to take my time. And I did some writing. But when I look back on that writing, it was intellectual. I feel like I hid behind concepts, the idea of systemic racism. And what I realized later was that I had to ask myself a much bigger question. What is wrong with me? that I cannot have this conversation? What is wrong with me that I am having trouble talking? And I began to do the work myself. The process of unlearning is a work of love, I believe. It's a work of love to yourself, and it's a work of love to the people around you. And I wanted to understand, what am I missing? And Dr. King, I was missing so much. And that unlearning process began with me knowing that I had to start edifying what I believe and being able to really speak about it in a way where I can be strong, rooted in love, rooted in my truth, staying engaged and making agreements with myself. But it took me making mistakes. And it also took me really looking in the mirror and saying, what is wrong with me that I can't talk about this?
So what were some of the assumptions that you had to come face to face with, that you had to challenge in yourself?
Well, I assumed that I was somebody that knew so much about equality, that I fought for equality in the LGBTQ plus community, that I believed so strongly in equality, that I had an understanding of equality, that my understanding of equality was connected also to my relationship with God. And then I learned something by unlearning. And actually, quite recently, I was watching something Eddie Glaude talked about, equality and the center of gravity around whiteness. And I thought to myself, isn't that interesting that I could not see that equality is calibrated to white? It's not calibrated to all of us right now. And I thought to myself, that is something that I did not see before. That is something that I did not understand before. The way that white supremacy culture is rooted in everything around me, that I would not be able to know that the equality could stand on its own maybe one day with our imaginations, by coming together in a new way, making change, changing policy. That can we change the center of gravity and orbit around something other than whiteness?
And how do we do that?
And how do we do that? Well,
how do we do that?
I'm curious to know what you think about that, and I have some thoughts too.
Woo! Well, I mean, you started on the journey. I mean, it's this whole unlearning and getting in spaces of uncomfortability, and exploring something new and different that many people may not want to do, but it's going to take a critical mass of us to do it. So I don't know. I know it's getting harder, with everything that's happening now with the critical race theory. And so, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, one of the ways that I'd like to speak to white people through this conversation about this process, I believe, is that in speaking in spaces of white affinity, we can start to edify what we believe. And I started with two women that I love so much, two white women that I respect, and we started to talk about it. And as I started to really relax into what I believe, then I started to talk to my family. Then I started to talk to my friends, my colleagues. And then I started to, in business conversations or in social gatherings, I started to interrupt. And in some of these spaces, they were white spaces. In some of these spaces, these were mixed race spaces. But for me, that concentric circle of you, where it starts by changing your insides first and then working outwards to share your story, share your journey with others, I believe that's just one of the ways that we can be a part, white people, of building the beloved community, by making it our responsibility to use our white power to unlearn.
And you said you started first within the group that's closest to you, the group that loves you, first and foremost, your family. Tell me how that was. How did they receive it? Because I think a lot of people, the gap is taking that leap and feeling like it's okay to take it and I won't be harmed by it. There's so many, I won't say so many, there are a few white people I know that first step is very difficult. What is going to happen to me? Who's going to abandon me? How did you deal with, or did you even have any fear?
Well, I think I understand this question. I think what you're saying is how did I arrive at that space with my family where I could talk to them about this? Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. How did you? A lot of people are afraid in the white community of losing connection with family, with friends, by having these kinds of conversations. How did you take that leap? I mean, in our Christian faith, there's a scripture that said, perfect love casts out fear. And I earnestly believe when you come from a place of pure love, then those fears begin to dissipate. It doesn't mean in the end that people may not decide to sever ties, but at least within you have a sense of peace and wholeness because you knew you came from that space and that place. And you only meant good from the journey, from the conversation.
Yeah. Well, for myself, I consider myself to have two families. I have the family that gave birth to me biologically, and then I have my artistic family and my colleagues. In terms of my family that gave birth to me, this was a conversation I was quite nervous to have, but in these spaces of white affinity, I learned about discomfort and productive discomfort. And I would like to mention just for a moment, a sort of a step ladder of something that I find quite interesting. There's, step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 1 underneath is this sort of hypoarousal. It's where there's an avoidance, a lack of interest in talking about this topic. Then on the third step above, there's this very hyper arousal where it's quite emotional and people get so nervous about talking about it that they can't. And then somewhere in the middle, there is this productive discomfort that I believe is a wisdom. And it's a wisdom to know that this is important work that starts with you and that it's okay to be afraid in these moments. Now, when I talked to my father, when I talked to my mother, when I talked with my sister and her loved ones, I always remembered to make sure that I was saying the words, I believe this. And also I would ask my father, my mother, I'd say, I'm curious to know why you would say something this way. Have you ever thought about saying it in another way? Have you ever thought about the ways in which we are white? So for example, white supremacy culture to me has some characteristics. I'll name a few right now. Defensiveness, a celebration of quantity over quality, competition, perfectionism. These are all things I believe that are also resonating at the same time with this idea of technicality and speed. And I asked the people around me that were white, that were in my family, what are the ways that we can slow down so that we can see the world? What are the ways that we can unlearn this speed, unlearn this need to faster, number one, competition all the time, and sit back and look at the complex, important problems around us and come together in love. So I always spoke from a place of I believe, and I also implored questions, hard questions. And I was at times afraid of the answer. And also I was unafraid of the answer because I was happy that we were having these conversations at all. In terms of...
Go ahead and finish.
And also in terms of my other family, when I have a lot of colleagues that are people of color that I love deeply, that I make art with, that I have so much of my life experience and my career with, that were also so graceful with me in the ways that they made it very clear to me what I could not see. And I took my time to receive that, to hear that and to make that also part of my unlearning, for that to be a sign that I had to do this work. And so I took that, I started my unlearning on my own in those white affinity spaces. And then I started speaking slowly. And it's like I said, I really thought about those stages of disequilibrium. And I tried to make sure I was always in the center there so that I could be productive and that I could make this a lifelong, forever work of unlearning, and that I would make it clear to those around me that this was not just a conversation we were having today, but this is a conversation I would keep having.
So I want to emphasize something, because I can imagine as people are listening, as you say, those that look like you especially, I think it's important that they hear this process that you're talking about, because sometimes in our anxiousness to do something and to get something right and to change something, we miss important processes. So I want to go back, because you started by saying there was the internal work that you did. You started asking some very fundamental questions of yourself when you found your speech paralyzed when it came to the issues around the Black community. And so you started inwardly. And I want to say that to everybody, that if we are going to create an outward reality of the beloved community, it really starts in each and every one of us. There's work that we all have to do to unlearn systems and structures, biases, and things that we have been all raised in this nation, that has created a lot of harm and a lot of damage and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. But this internal journey is where it all started. And then as you move through that space, it doesn't mean you are not continuing to do that internal work, because each step along the way, you're confronted with something else that you have to ask other questions about. But you did then began to do some work within the safer spaces first, which is, what you call your family. And that's defined different ways by different people as to what that is. And then now you're sitting on this platform. I don't know how many times you've had these conversations about unlearning on public platforms, but I can imagine that this is one of a few that you've had. And there's more that you're going to do. I'm imagining, because you said this is a lifelong mission for you. So the question I want to ask you is, how do we help people who are in seats of privilege, and that can be in many ways, but seats of privilege, who may not be aware of the things that they need to learn? What is your advice to them?
Well, speaking to white people, my advice to them would be to look inside yourself and also look around you and try to understand the ways that white supremacy culture is at play all the time. And I mean, when I say all the time, I mean, I do this every day, constantly. I am always keeping my eyes open. Unlearning gives me new eyes to see the world. And when I see it, I point it out, and I can point it out to myself first and say, okay, I saw that, and reflect on that moment. And then I start to notice these things happen, and I start to speak. But what I would say to people of privilege that are white, that I would really, really encourage you to do some deep, deep unlearning on the ways that you collude with white power, with white supremacy, in business, in work, in the way that you do or do not talk about these issues. I would ask you, I would implore you to edify what you believe. And, I'm trying to think of a concrete story, because I feel like through stories, sometimes I can answer these questions better. When I sang the national anthem at the inauguration this year, the day before, I went to see where I was going to be standing. And I walked in with a bulletproof vest on because we were nervous about being in the Capitol.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, would you like to see the Capitol today? And I said no, because I wanted to get in and get out. And then I went in and I saw where I was going to stand and sing. And I was finished with the walkthrough of the show, which was a beautiful day. But as I was leaving, I stopped myself. And I said, why did you say no, that you don't want to see the Capitol today? And it was because I didn't want to see the place where the insurrection had taken place. And I went back to that woman that asked me, and I said, my apologies, I'd like to see the Capitol. And then I walked through the Capitol like a detective. And I looked for evidence of the truth, because we see these things on screens, right? We witness these things on the news, but to be there in person, I was afraid. Dr. King, I knew in that moment I was avoiding this issue, and I stopped myself and I said, don't avoid it, go look at it and go be with it. And guess what I did? I just walked through and I searched until I found, they told me, they said, you won't find much. We've cleaned up most of it, but I found a window that had blunt force, that was cracked. And I went to that window and I stared at it and I saw the white rage. And I stared at it and I reflected and I thought about what I was about to do the next day. And I thought about what a gift this unlearning was also to myself, that I would take that moment to go there and see it for myself, because that day to me was not about Donald Trump. That day to me was about white supremacy. And it was a day that we could all take our hands and point right at it, where it was crystal clear. These are the ways in which I believe that we all can unlearn. It's when we notice ourselves avoiding, when we notice ourselves colluding, when we notice ourselves not stopping to ask ourselves hard questions. Now, this even shows up for me in business. Sometimes somebody the other day said to me, what does it mean to you that creative freedom is power? And I found myself, while I was talking to them, thinking about what power meant to the person that was talking to me, what power meant to me. And I said to them, well, I want to be clear that we are celebrating earned power and not unearned power.
Right.
And yet, while I was saying that, I also continued to ask myself, is that the right thing to say? Is that the right way to frame this? And also, there are centuries of moral healing that we have to do so that we as white people can be unafraid to have these conversations and to ask ourselves the ways in which we are blind. Why did I hold on for so long to not seeing color? I do not know, but I need to see color, because when I see color, I can see the truth.
Yes. And thank you for saying that, because so many people take my father's words out of context when he said my 4 children would live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. By no means was he talking about a colorblind world. But I want to ask you something. There's so many people, obviously, who don't think like you, who would probably feel that there is no such thing as racism today. A lot of people who are uncomfortable with the notion of white supremacy and who feel like when these conversations are happening, fingers are being pointed at them. How do we invite that community in without them feeling threatened, but in a way that they can feel like this is a journey that all of us need to be on for the sake of even them and our whole humanity? How do we do that?
Well,
In other words, how do you reach your other white brothers and sisters who, as soon as you start saying white privilege, white supremacy,
Right.
they're going to shut down.
I know. I start saying whiteness, white power. I listen, I've been in those conversations in those rooms and I see the bristle happen.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I would say? And maybe this is not particularly radical to anybody. Maybe this would be quite radical to some people, but I believe that white people want to change. And I believe that white people want to unlearn. And I believe in white people. And I believe in having compassion for white people, that they don't know how to hear those words without getting defensive, without trying to protect themselves, without trying to hoard power, without trying to keep themselves on top. When I think about the zero sum theory, I think that it's deeply ingrained in our minds in this way that we need to unlearn that if a person of color gets +1, that we are now that it's -1 for white people. And I would invite them to know that other white people believe in other white people, that they want to do this work and change, and that there is love here. That this is not a conversation about white supremacy in a way that it is designed to hurt you. It's done in a way that is designed, I believe, for myself. It's designed to educate me about things that at one time I could not see. But now if I were to describe white supremacy, I would say I could stand in the center of an 8 ball and point all the way around 360, that it's all around me. And once we start to have these conversations from a place of love, where maybe white people can say to other white people, I believe in you. I believe you want to unlearn. Because I've got so many white friends, I'll tell you, that white folks, I can feel them, that they want to be able to talk to me about it, but they don't know how. And very often I feel myself saying to them, I know how much you want to unlearn. And you just have to begin the process, and you just have to start to try and be braver in that moment. Be brave enough to feel that discomfort, be brave enough to hear these words and accept them as they're a bitter truth. And we cannot lie. I mean, I have this book, and I feel that it's important I wanted to say this quote to you if it felt relevant. It's from a book by Kiese Layman. It's called How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. And when he's speaking about social antagonism, he says, it is an addiction broken only by honest reckoning, consistent practice, and the welcoming of radical spirits. What I believe is that I can speak to other white people, and white people can speak to other white people with love and say, I believe in you. This is a practice. This is a discipline. This is honest reckoning. We can do this together. We can sit in this together, and we can be a part of embracing radical spirits to move us forward so that the beloved community can continue to grow. But I understand why you asked me this question, because it is my feeling that white supremacy is it's the pipes, right? And we're the water of love. And we're exploding with love, that we want out of these pipes, but we're still water in the pipes. And how do we get out? And I believe one of the ways that we can get out, one of the ways that we can speak to other white people, is to tell them, white people telling other white people, I believe that you want to unlearn. I believe in you. I believe you want to be part of the change.
So this process that we're talking about, I think it's important to emphasize that this is a process of addition, perhaps even multiplication, and not subtraction and division. I think that there's so many people who feel like by opening up this world where we all can see each other and value each other fully, and create a society where there is equity and there is a sharing of resources, and people are treated with dignity and respect, and that justice can be a reality.
that we are actually adding to humanity and we're not subtracting taking something away. And I think that's what people hear oftentimes, that if I say anything about white supremacy and I start moving away from these notions, that I am subtracting from me. And we have to help them to understand that that's not what's happening at all. So let's talk about that. These are, you said it, everybody has said it. These are social constructs that we have created. Humans, we've created. And so we collectively, and there's constructs that all of us have participated in some way or another. And this is somewhat of a risky statement to make, but believe it or not, if everybody in the universe addresses their own personal biases, in, let's just say, even Black people, a Black person in power without us addressing these social constructs can actually perpetuate white supremacy through these racial systems, because we as humans have to undo these systems that we have created based off of this notion of superior and inferior. My question is, do you feel from the bottom of your heart that we not only have the power, but that we will deconstruct white supremacy in our lifetime?
That's one whole question, Dr. King. In our lifetime.
And I know, that's relative because we don't control when our last breath is, but in terms of lifespan, you get.
But I believe I understand what you're asking me. And this is what I believe. I believe that if we operate on that level that you're talking about, that's that unconscious competence. That's the ability for us to open our minds to knowing that when white is at the top all the time, that we are missing out on life. When equality is not equal because it's always calibrated to white, that we are missing out on the world. We are missing out on so much humanity, and we're living in this space, and we're missed. It's like the cultural iceberg, right? We're up here and we're missing all the depth. We're living on the surface. And what I would say is that I do believe that there will be a day, someday, that we walk hand in hand, eye to eye, with humility and hope, in healing, with more wholeness. But this only can be done if white people and other people that look like me begin this process of unlearning and make it a lifetime effort, so that we can see it in this lifetime, so that we can understand that when we have that white power, when we have that white privilege, we need to use that power and that privilege to educate ourselves and educate other white people. But I do believe this is possible. Now, I was listening to Imani Perry talk about utopias the other day, and she said that she didn't believe in utopias, which I thought was interesting. But I don't think what you're talking about is necessarily a utopia. I think what you're talking about is a world where equality is not centered in gravity of white, but that we orbit around each other, that we orbit around culture, that we take a step back. These systems have to change, and we can change these systems, but we have to organize around love.
Exactly.
So that's what I believe. How do we organize around love?
And that's one of the reasons we launched this Be Love campaign, because most of us we don't know about that kind of unconditional understanding, redemptive goodwill toward all love. And it's the only way that we're going to get there. And so, you know, I invited you the other day to join us on this journey, this Be Love journey, as we try to infect the world with something that is really organic to us. We just don't know it. We've allowed ourselves to be exposed to so many other things that we've lost sight of the organic of who we really are. And so just in closing, I wanted to ask you to share with everybody something you shared with me the other day. I thought it was so powerful. When we were talking, you said that, I think you said you had an allergy to the poison of white supremacy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I believe now through my process of unlearning and learning, I believe we all drink the poison of white supremacy when we're young, when we're first born. And that part of the unlearning process is, you know, for lack of a better analog, it's like, how do we throw up this poison? But what I've realized is that I actually have noticed a change in my body. When I do this work, I feel warm. When I organize around love and I stop orbiting around whiteness, I feel hugged. I feel loved. I feel the world in a way that I've never felt it before. And when things around me start to speed up and I start to experience that white supremacy culture speeding up around me, that competition, perfectionism, beyond time, let's go, you know, hoarding power. When that starts to happen, I feel like I'm allergic to it now because I've been doing this work and I start to feel this tingling in my body. I start to feel heat all around me, and I start to feel disconnected from the people around me. And sometimes in meetings, I've been in, to Dr. King, if people have started shouting at each other over God knows what, bless. I would write the word adaptive on a Post-it, stick it on the wall, and walk out of the room. And that would be my way of interrupting. And I would walk back in and I would say, I don't know what you were fighting about, but I know that this is not the way to solve the problem. And what is a more adaptive solution? Can we take a step back and look at this? But I notice it because I'd like to ask other white people to look inside themselves and ask themselves, are there moments throughout your day or in your life where you notice this very rushed feeling inside of you that like you have to keep up with something? And I would beckon white people to ask themselves, are you keeping up with white supremacy culture? Or are you keeping up with another idea that you have? But I beckon you to ask the question, is it that? Because it might be because it was for me. And when I deny that of myself, meaning when I notice it, and that's part of my unlearning, is my ability to see that now. When I notice it, I slow down, I take a breath, and I either interrupt or remove myself. And I start to take an approach that is inspired by everybody. But it's not inspired by white supremacist culture. It's inspired by relationships, community. It's inspired by deep culture, love, the celebration of all, but not this unconscious incompetence. I want to bring this up again as we talked about bias earlier, because this unconscious incompetence, I'm using this as a strong word, incompetence, and it sits right alongside ignorance that white people hold onto very strongly. And when you hold on to that, you are committing yourself to oppression. And I ask white people to ask yourself, do you realize that you're doing that? And maybe in that moment when you feel that thing in your body, are you committing to oppression without even realizing it? And can you hold yourself back? And can you unlearn And then can you find these spaces, whether they're white affinity spaces or they're mixed race spaces, to have these conversations and then have these conversations with your families and move out. I'm sorry to keep going on about this, but I'm trying to tie in what we were talking about earlier to this feeling in my body so that everyone could understand, the white people that are listening, that if you are feeling sometimes like you do not belong, that you are trying to keep up with something, you might have this allergy that I have to this, you might have this allergy to there being an absence of love and a dominance of whiteness. And that's just what I believe. But I do believe white people want to change. I do believe not all white people know how. And I do believe that some white people are so filled with rage around this topic that it's difficult for them to talk about. But I do know that change is possible because I know it's possible inside myself, which means I know it's possible in somebody else.
Wow, this is oof. There's been a lot to chew on tonight, and as you were talking, I thought about my father's words that there's nothing in all the world more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity, and you're talking about a liberation that frees the world. It's not just about white people going on this journey to get themselves straight. It's about what Daddy said as perfect. I think he even said perfect love is justice concretized. It's this journey where, as you open up yourself to be a vessel for love to flow in and through, you become this this liberated person that is not even self-oppressed, because a lot of this is also self-oppressing. If it's true that white people do want to unlearn and don't know how to, I think there's some people in the Black community who would say, I don't know about that, because they've seen such rage and unrepentance in so many, especially in so many officers' faces, to some of those on Capitol Hill who are holding hostage, important pieces of legislation. This journey of unlearning can't come quick enough for many people. But the most important thing is that the space where you are and the influence and the power that you have in your platform, hopefully, will begin to plant important seeds so that people can begin to not just theorize, as you call it, performative anti-racism. And they move sincerely to this space where they are implementing out of love the demands of justice, as Dad said, and using love to correct everything that stands against love, legislatively, conversationally, as you did in that room where you put adaptive. We call that helping people to come to terms with how do we create these win-win outcomes and scenarios. So thank you for this conversation. I wish we could talk longer. They're telling me it's time to wrap.
I know, me too. I did want to say to you that I didn't mean to earlier. You mentioned critical race theory, and I didn't mean to dodge that question there. I got so moved by our conversation that it got lost, and I think it got lost because of this simple truth that I believe. I believe that Republicans weaponize critical race theory. And I believe that they weaponize love all the time to gain power and to divide us, to conquer for more of that white power. So I would invite other white people to potentially have conversations about how this is just one of the things that is used to divide us. And in what ways can we fight for there to be a curriculum or something in schools for the kids at a young age? Like, I would have loved when I was younger, a young white girl, that I would have been taught that I was born into centuries of unearned power. That's the type of education discussion I wish that we were having. So I didn't want to dodge that question from you.
Right.
So I just wanted to bring it back to that.
I understand perfectly. And the reality is that at some point we have to move beyond politicizing everything so that we can do the real work of creating a just, humane, equitable, and peaceful world. Those are members of our beloved community. They are our brothers and sisters. And we have to find a way to bridge and invite them on the journey with us to unlearn. And so thank you so much, Lady Gaga. I look forward to continuing our conversations even offline. And thank you for making time tonight to join us. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. This was a very important, critical conversation, especially in light of the times that we are living in, the polarized times, the divisive times, the attacks on critical race theory, on voting rights. These are conversations that are necessary and essential because we have to beat the enemy, not people that's trying to defeat us as humanity. Daddy called them the triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism. And through love, we can be love and we can conquer those things. So I told you it was going to be powerful tonight. It has been, and I cannot thank Lady Gaga enough for her willingness to be vulnerable and transparent this evening. Thank you for that transparency and that vulnerability. I think it helps so many people. And so as I close, thank you so much. As I close tonight, I want to emphasize the importance of grace and love on all of our journeys to unlearning, because without question, our journeys will come with missteps. Let's be honest, we've all made missteps. We've all made mistakes. Some of the mistakes have created pain and suffering for generations of people and continue to do so. And we have to do what is radically necessary to turn that around. But if we center love in our efforts, as Lady Gaga kept talking about, this actually gravitating from love instead of whiteness or any other notion that we have come up with in humanity. But if we gravitate from love, we make room for redemption and transformation to exist. If we be love in action and correct everything that stands against love, then we can counter inequity with equity, and we can counter injustice with justice, and we can counter ignorance with accurate knowledge, and most of all, we can encounter love. We can counter hate, with love, and effectuate real transformation. In closing, I want to invite you to join us for our next Beloved Community Talks. I told you we're going to have part 2. We will dive deeper with former American extremist Christian Piccolini. Christian will share his own journey of unlearning hate. Also joining that conversation is behavioral scientist and author Dr. Pragwa Agrawal. I can't say her name. Agrawal, I think that's it, Agrawal. Dr. Agrawal will provide us with practical tools, or Agrawal. She will provide us with practical tools to engage in the unlearning process. So join us now, visit our website and take the Be Love Pledge, and let's make love our new norm. We've been talking about a new norm. That's the new norm. So that when you get off this to Beloved Community Talks tonight, in your household, whoever you talk to on the phone tomorrow, say, my new norm is be love. I'm going to gravitate from that place of love from this day forward. And I'm going to be on this journey to learn, to unlearn, to relearn what is true and what is powerful in terms of creating a more just, humane, equitable, and peaceful world. Thank you from the bottom of my heart so much for joining us in this conversation with Lady Gaga. She was a very important seed for us tonight that I believe will reap a harvest. So until next time, continue to be safe and be loved.
Let our minds be love and our hands be love, our hearts be love, be love. Let our minds be love, our hands be love, and our hearts be love, be love.
Welcome to Microsoft Atlanta. We are thrilled to host you today.
Hi, I'm Brooke Smith. As you can see, we're here at the garage, and I would like to thank Microsoft and the King Center for the amazing day we had here today. We learned about Copilot, and we got to experiment with some different things.
Because you can show how you can use AI for good.
There's some things that we have a responsibility to do, and it starts with each one of you. The world will never change if young people are not a part of the change.
Who controls AI? We do, for now. I want you to write this statement down. We can stop ourselves from destroying ourselves with the misuse of our own instruments.
One of the principles of nonviolence is nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. So as we are trying to correct things in our world and use these instruments to solve problems, our purpose is to solve the problem, to solve the injustice, not to do anything to harm and hurt the people. Because we want to create an atmosphere and environment where people can redeem themselves, they can restore themselves, they can correct themselves.
I would like to thank Microsoft and the King Center for the amazing opportunity to learn about AI.
And I encourage you to help make a change in the world by using Copilot to help fight different movements worldwide.
It's really important that not only is technology being used to make sure that you all can get to where you need to be in life, but it's also very important that you all are learning technology, because it's going to be a cycle. People are creating technology for you, and then at some point you're going to be leveraging technology for those to come behind you.
So at the Office of the Mayor, one of the things I'm working on diligently is updating our computer labs. And with that, I'm building the first esports program in the city of Atlanta. Have you all heard of esports? Does anybody play Fortnite? Do we have any Fortnite players in here? Roadblocks, NBA 2K. So those are some of the games that we're playing in our league. And so we're working with community partners to, they build the syllabi, they're coaching you, teaching you. You can go to college on a free scholarship to Georgia Tech, Georgia State by being on an esports team. Did you know that?
I want to thank them for inviting us out. I had a wonderful time, and I'm glad they're making this opportunity for each kids of APS and around the globe.
One thing I found interesting today, you can use AI to help enhance your learnings.
How do we keep ethics at the center of what we do?
Yeah, I think the most important piece of having ethics is you all being the people that are actually building the technology, right? I see so much diversity in this room as well there too, from different women, different people from different backgrounds as well there too, right? AI is built on people providing data, right? We need to make sure that one, we're the people who can build it, but two, being able to provide that data so that way we can have a diversity in thought.
It has fun uses too, like I can take a picture of Lil Baby and change his shirt green or change his shirt red or add something in the background. Yeah, it's fun ways I can use it, but I'm really into like the way that I can really just use it as like a genius partner. Like
a genius partner.
yeah, like it can answer any question I ever have, and it's special to me.
I definitely learned a lot about AI and how it doesn't always take away from everything in your brain like I thought it would.
Everyone's like connected, and technology has like connected the whole world together, and we can learn off of that and build off of it and improve our entire world.
So when you get to certain levels in this world, you want to make sure that you're not making decisions using AI that comes from a place of evilness or wickedness, but you're using your soul self. You want to make sure that you're including compassion and empathy and sympathy, that you're thinking about not how just it can benefit others, but let me reflect on this, because you have that capability in your intelligence to reflect.
AI is not perfect yet. It is getting better and it's enhancing our everyday life, but you all, the people that are going to be able to perfect it as well there too. So making sure that you guys remain curious, challenging the stuff that comes out of AI.
Save the date. Join us on Saturday, September 13th for the beloved Community International Expo at the King Center. Experience the beauty of global culture right on Sweet Auburn Avenue with performances, food, music, art, and traditions from over 35 countries. It's a journey around the world you won't want to miss. Come celebrate Dr. King's vision of peace, unity, and nonviolence. One day, one world, one community. See you there.
When I think about love, I think about family, kindness, and empathy. I've taken the King Center pledge to be loved by unlearning harmful biases and stereotypes. I choose to be loved by employing love and light to disrupt and drive out hate and darkness. Take the Be Love pledge today and join us Wednesday, July 9th for the King Center's Be Love Day 2025. For more info, go to kingcenter.org/belove.
Who else thinks we could use some more love right now?
Your hands be love, your hearts be love, be love. Yo, what's up, loved one? My name is Royce, and us, Common Hymnal, we have joined partnering with the King Center for the next few weeks for the song challenge, Be Love. The Be Love challenge, guys. Check this out. Comment Be Love, and we'll send you this link to this backing track. Join us in this movement. For the next few weeks, up until Be Love Day on July 9th, we'll be posting and sharing everything that you send to us. So join this challenge, guys. Be a part of the movement. Where is the love?
Let our minds be love, our hands be love, our hearts be love, be love. Let our minds be love, our hands be love, our hearts be love. Be love, let our minds be love, our hands be love, our hearts be love, be Our hands be love, our hearts be love, be love.
With our next guest, I'm honored to be interviewing him and talking with him about kind of bringing together all that we talked about today to discuss creating the beloved community. I believe that he does work in concerning practices and solutions that help us to create the beloved community. So it's an honor to interview Mr. Rashad Robinson, president of Color of Change. I'm going to bring him on now. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, good to be with you.
It's good to see you again. It was just yesterday, I think. Was it yesterday?
Yes, it was just
Feels like it was long ago. it must have been a long day.
Yes.
But I know your time with us is short today, but you know, Mr. Robinson, you said to call you Rashad.
Yes.
I call you Rashad. Rashad. When I examine and look at what you're doing with Color of Change, those are the two words that stick out to me: practices and solutions.
Yeah.
And what Color of Change does is you develop campaigns that end unjust practices concerning Black people, but you also help come up with solutions that move everyone forward, which I believe is a model for how to create the beloved community. If we look at injustices for groups and said, hey, let's end that. Let's end these practices and let's figure out ways for all of us to move forward. Can you talk about that concept for a moment and how you believe it helps to create the type of world we want to live in?
Absolutely. You know, I believe that when oppressed people win, of all different sort of backgrounds, those victories are victories that power all of us forward, right? When feminists win victories for women, they just don't help little girls dream bigger dreams, but they allow little boys to be their best selves as well. And so the idea of us not being in a zero-sum game, but us actually thinking about what can be the solutions that are force multipliers to raise the floor on what's acceptable and push up the ceiling on what's possible. For all of us, that's how I think about the work that we do at Color of Change. And we do that through strategic campaigning, right? Because this is a day about love, but love is a verb. Love is about action, right? It's not just about something that you say, it's about what you do every single day. And so what we try to do is in moments of deep crisis, deep pain, deep optimism, deep pessimism, we try to give people something to do. And it all comes from our founding in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, when Black folks were literally on their roofs begging for the government to do something and left to die. And Katrina illustrated a lot of things that people already knew: geographic segregation, generational poverty, the impacts of what we've done to our planet. And like COVID and like so many of these other moments, right, it wasn't just those issues. It was that no one was nervous about disappointing our community. And so what we really work to do is not just mobilize our communities, but provide pathways and on-ramps from people of all races to be able to channel that outrage, that energy into something that is actionable. And that, right, that is the spirit of love. Love is not just benign. Love is not just stagnant. Love is about what we do every single day.
Love is, and I was thinking about that too, that Color of Change and you with your work, you provide pathways and platforms. So when we say we need to be loved, there are organizations like Color of Change that say, hey, we have a way you can do that. And then the King Center has ways that people can be loved, but it's providing those avenues. We talk for a moment about Miss Gwen. I think that's was a seminal moment for me, for this elderly woman who, wow.
76 years old,
76.
right?
Actually looks like my paternal grandmother. And think about her in prison, you know, no matter what happened, and to be sent back after being out for missing a call while she was trying to improve herself as a human being. I think love was Color of Change and people who signed on and other orgs stepping up to say we won't stand for this, and that helps to create the beloved community. Can you talk about Miss Gwen and what happened with her?
Yeah, and I mean, she was taking a computer class and missed a call from her parole office. I mean, we talk about reentry. We talk about folks being able to come back in society and find ways to engage themselves. You know, the United States has about 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population. We incarcerate for so many different things in this country, and so we use a carceral system as a way to punish and create punishments in ways that has nothing to do with our safety and has nothing to do with our justice. And so I believe in a world of restorative justice. I believe in a world of healing, but that actually means that we have to have public policy. I talk a lot when people talk to me about compassion and empathy, which I believe is so powerful at the individual level. But I think a lot about not just what does it mean to have compassion and empathy at an individual level, but what does it mean to have a society that is compassionate and empathetic? What does it mean to have a justice system, a healthcare system, an education system that has compassion and empathy baked into its core? And those are the things that we have to sort of channel our energy to demand. And so, yes, we made the demands to free Miss Gwynn of sort of any further time in a cage.
Great.
But we also need to recognize that there's about 4,000 other folks just like her in similar situations, elderly folks that pose no risk whatsoever, who should be home right now. During the global pandemic, we watched as the COVID-19 ripped through prisons and jails into institutions that were never designed to provide any type of human rights or restoration, but were only designed to create sort of harsh treatment. But we watched as people were dying behind bars. We watched as the folks who were working there were bringing COVID back into their communities and into their families. And we recognize that we cannot incarcerate ourselves to a better society. And in fact, we are not producing safety and we are not producing justice. So I want to thank everyone who stood up for Miss Gwynn, but to say that as much as we want to win that victory, we need to also change the rules so that we're winning victories for the Miss Gwynns that we don't know, that we're making the system work better. That I said earlier, we are raising the floor on what's acceptable and we're pushing up the ceiling on what's possible.
Let's stay right there, because we're talking about creating a beloved community. And sometimes people don't believe it's tangible, that we can do it. But Mrs. Coretta Scott King, founder of the King Center, she talked about the beloved community being a realistic, achievable society where we have conflict, but we just resolve it without bitterness. And we don't have violence as a response to conflict. And she talked about transcending race and tribe and all these different things, as Dr. King did. But the three key things that you've mentioned here have been policies, practices, and solutions. And I believe all three are imperative to us creating that type of community that Dr. King and Mrs. King envisioned. And let's talk about that. How important is it for us to look at policies and say, you know, we can't just stand by and let policy stand. Love is changing policies as well.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the question, right, I think for all of us is how do we actually get there? And one of the frameworks that we really think about at Color of Change is not mistaking presence for power, right? Presence is visibility, awareness, retweets, shout outs from the stage. It's people knowing about the issue. Presence is a good thing. But when we mistake presence or the mere sort of visibility of something for actually it getting done, which is power, then we think we've done something that we haven't actually done, right? We might mistake a Black president, which is good, for thinking that we're post-racial. We might mistake the fact that America celebrates a lot of Black celebrities and Black cultural products for America loving Black people as much as America loving Black culture. And we know that America can love, celebrate, and monetize Black culture and hate
not love Black people
at the same time, right? Not actually be in relationship with us in the right way. And so I say all of that to say that as we think about the policies, the practices, and the solutions, the pathway to get there starts with each and every one of us. It starts with us engaging and pushing. You know, the forces that stand in the way of real change, that have always stood in the way of real change, that have benefited from the sort of, the genocide of indigenous and native folks, the servitude of Black folks, the subjugation of women, all of the ways in which communities have not been able to be fully seen and counted. Those forces will constantly exist, but I don't believe those forces can beat our unified, strategic, loving, forceful response. Right. And so the question, the thing for all of us is that we will always lose in the sort of back rooms of the conversation if all of us are not lined up at the front door. And so as we think again about love, we need to be lined up at the front door collectively to push and demand. We need to do it in unison. And I love the panel you had earlier with my API brothers and sisters, with a deep recognition that we have to be in solidarity across communities and recognize that our victories, if we build them correctly, can be force multipliers for more victories for all of us.
Yeah, the Color Change is doing something now with tech policy.
Yes.
That I think it's unique and it's very important, because it reminds me of a quote from Dr. King, where he said, if we don't have a spiritual and moral awakening, we'll destroy ourselves in the misuse of our own instruments. And what we're seeing with tech policy now and with technology is, if we're not careful, if we don't couple this heightened technology with an awakening, we'll destroy ourselves. Tell us about what Color Change is doing with technology, because I think that's important to understand. Technology can help us create the beloved community, or it can stand in our way of creating the beloved community.
That was such a word. And I so appreciate that, because the technology that has so much potential to bring us into the future can also drag us into the past. And the thing that we're really facing is that technology in and of itself is not built, to move us forward or drag us back, right? It is though controlled oftentimes by forces that are incentivized, right? So while TV in the 60s did so much work to channel images from the South to other parts of the country and other parts of the world about what was happening, it also is a place where so much disinformation and so much content which has spurred hatred against our community and others. And so we know any technology can sort of have its ups and downs, but what we're dealing with, the sort of space of the internet platforms, is something at a level and speed for which we have never really seen. The platforms, the Facebooks and Twitters and Googles of the world have gone before Congress and have actually argued that that they're not beholden to civil rights law. And so, the hard-won victories that so many folks contributed to, these platforms, this new technology, saying, hey, we don't actually have to abide by them. And they're using sort of weird loopholes to try to get there. And so we actually need our government. We actually need public policy to step in. We also need a new level of accountability. We can't actually get to real change without clear accountability. The platforms right now believe that they are immune to type of oversight. Similar to police. And we have to right the balances of power, right the scales of power. And so part of what we're doing at Color of Change every single day is channeling the energy, aspirations, and fight of Black folks and allies of every race to both hold government accountable and hold these platforms accountable. In the process, put forward solutions that ensure that these platforms actually allow us to communicate while not actually put us in harm's way. These are huge public squares. I'll just end by saying Facebook has nearly 3 billion users. That is more followers than Christianity. Now, one single person should not control that type of platform without any type of accountability, without any type of oversight, and with total immunity. That is a design flaw, and that is a flaw that we have to fix. So we're not looking for charitable solutions to structural problems. We are looking for structural change, and structural change that will allow us to move things forward.
Wow, thank you for that. So we want to leave the people with something today, as we've talked about love all day, and we're going to follow this interview, this conversation, with a segment on nonviolence. But I just want to highlight what we've discussed, that we've talked about essentially infusing our practices, policy, solutions. And then you talked about accountability, which to me is about wisdom and decisions, infusing all of that with love.
Yeah.
And what would these systems and structures look like if we do that? And if we figure that out, and if we start establishing coalitions or building better coalitions and building coalitions more, which is another powerful thing about Color of Change, how you join with other organizations to get the work done. If we do that, we can create this beloved community that we envision and that you and I both believe can become a reality. So can you just, as we close out this segment, share one thing that gives you hope that we can, with love, by being love, create the beloved community?
What gives me hope is this past summer, when many folks thought that the best we could do in terms of activism was clap outside of our windows or uplift investigative journalism, racial justice drove people to the streets of all races and all backgrounds to speak up, to stand up, and to push back against injustice collectively. And so many people joined us and other organizations in that fight. So I just want to welcome folks into the work, into the action of love, to join us at Color of Change, or to join a local organization in your community, but to join the efforts to translate the presence and the visibility of this moment where more people are speaking up and standing up, but while we have more forces entrenched trying to stop that progress, to come together collectively to build a better tomorrow. So I want to invite people into the action, because my hope always stems from the willingness of everyday people of all backgrounds to stand up and fight for the things that matter the most, to do it collectively together, and to build more power to make justice real in this country.
I believe that we can do that. Thank you so much. And the King Center is joining in that work as well, to be active, because love is active. Love implements the demands of justice. Love is strategic and powerful. And we talked about all of that today. And we're so grateful for you being with us to share as we close out our conversations and move into our nonviolent segment about the ways that we can create the beloved community. Thank you so much for being with us, Rashad.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you, Bernice King, for inviting me to share this message. When I think about love, I think about cherishing others and compassion. I pledge to be love. I choose to be love every day by owning the responsibility to challenge injustice. I choose to be love by promoting true peace, which, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, includes justice. I choose to be love by employing love and light to disrupt and drive out hate and darkness. I choose to be love. You can too. Take the King Center Be Love Pledge Day at thekingcenter.org/belove.
I think Mrs. King taught all of us the importance of determination. She was courageous, she was bold, she was innovative, She had the ability to walk into any room, and it didn't matter to her whether the people inside that room wanted to hear from her or not. She went into every room she felt she needed to advance the cause of justice. And wherever she went, she reflected, she modeled the dignity and determination of civil rights leadership. But more than that, she reflected the dignity and determination of the ordinary people who gave the civil rights movement its power. I've learned from that dignity, I've learned from that determination, and it has taught me that sometimes you have to believe things that you haven't seen before. Sometimes you have to just trust that a way can be made out of no way. Sometimes you just have to be determined to do the things that justice requires. And that legacy is what allows the King Center to exist today. It's what allows us to celebrate the life of Dr. King and the movement that he inspired. I'm grateful for Mrs. King because without her, we would not be in the place we stand to do the work that we do. I want to hold on to her determination and be inspired by it, be moved by it, be led by it. Thank you, Mrs. King.
Hello and welcome to season 3 of the Rethink podcast. I am your host, Cameron Friend. Thank you for joining us again for this conversation. The King Center is debuting a brand new season of the Rethink podcast, and each month we will have a brand new episode for you that will focus on specific topics ranging from war, racism, voting rights, economic injustice, and a global food crisis, and more. And today, joining me for this important conversation is going to be my co-host and friend, Dr. Vanetta West.
Thank you, Cameron. Welcome, everyone. We're grateful that you're joining us for this critical conversation about the injustice of war.
Yes, and today we're going to be witness to a conversation about the injustice of war and specifically the terror that we are witnessing in Gaza, the Sudan, and in Congo. Millions of lives have been affected and tens of thousands of innocent people have died due to the ongoing fight for land, power, and resources. In particular, the atrocities taking place in Gaza has led to the worldwide activation of young people across the world who are standing in opposition to war and genocide. There are no winners in war, as the bloodshed and death across the world leaves us all empty and desolated. Dr. West, can you please give us a Kingian view on why this conversation is so important for us all?
Cameron, it's critical, very important, urgent even, for all of us to understand the facets of militarism/war, the outcomes, the things that we can do to prevent it, the mentality, the ideology, the thinking that goes into this heightened warfare and militarism that we're seeing across the globe. From a Kingian perspective, of course, there are 3 Kingian evils, as we call them. That means that there are evils based on the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and they are racism and all forms of discrimination, systemic and otherwise, that becomes pervasive and causes us to put things in place that harm and prevent the progress of other people groups. Then there's poverty, which is, of course, connected to greed and extreme materialism and extreme capitalism. And then militarism or war, this use of weapons of mass destruction and automatic weapons and other forms of weapons that are closely aligned, militarism, war, closely aligned with, interconnected with racism and poverty, causing us not to reach the beloved community that Dr. King talked about. And so today, as we talk about the injustice of war, we want to remember these words from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, that violence is a descending spiral. We're seeing that across the globe as you join us, as you're listening, as you share in the chat spaces on YouTube and Facebook and X, and on the kingcenter.org where this is airing today. We want you to put in there in the chat spaces your thoughts about militarism, your mourning as we mourn the loss of lives, and connecting this to Dr. King, where we've seen where people will share that Dr. King would be for militarism. War in any form in any nation is absolutely erroneous. From this man of peace, true peace, where we understand we'll have tension. But we invite you in today to this conversation to connect the dots to the other evils, to understand the injustice of war. What are the outcomes? What causes war? And so in doing that today, we want to have our CEO of the King Center, Dr. Bernice King, join in this conversation, a peacemaker herself, a child of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mrs. Coretta Scott King, the founder of the King Center, who is a part of this vital conversation today that we're grateful that you're joining for. So we'll have Dr. Bernice King join us now as our first guest for this conversation on the injustice of war.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever people might be as they listen into this conversation.
Yes, and joining Dr. King today, it's going to be Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove. And Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove is a spiritual writer, preacher, and community cultivator. He serves as the Assistant Director for Partnerships and Fellowships at Yale University Center for Public Theology and Public Policy. Please welcome Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove.
Hello, it's a joy to be with all of y'all. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. King, Reverend, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Dr. West, as always, thank you for helping to usher this conversation, as important as it is for us all to understand. And I'm going to open it up with the first question, and we can get started here. And Dr. King, I would love for you to have a chance to kind of kick us off. And so when we look out into the world and we have seen the effects of war and militarism, racism, religious violence, land rights on human lives, starting off with the Palestine-Israeli conflict, since the Hamas attack on October 7th, 2023, there have been tens of thousands of Palestinians killed in the aftermath, as well as a targeted food shortage for inhabitants in Gaza. And Dr. King, you have made direct calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and the atrocities that are now being called by many a genocide. How would you describe what is taking place in Gaza, and why is this moment so important for us all?
Well, let me just say, starting out, that this is a very difficult and challenging subject that we're talking about. Difficult and challenging because as a humanity, we have yet to rise to the occasion of understanding the importance of truly valuing human life and understanding the sacredness of it. My father's philosophy and methodology is steeped in that. And so when you look at what's happening in Gaza, holistically, what's happening, it is destruction of that sacred life that we all should understand and be willing to find alternatives when we have these conflicts and when we have these ideological differences. And so what started out as being seen and reported and understood by a lot of people as a terroristic attack has now kind of morphed into the taking of very, I won't even call it innocent because I don't like using that word, but I'll just say civilian life of people who have nothing to do with what happened with the attack and who are just trying to live their lives. And so when you look at that and the number of civilian lives that have happened. And the targets, the places that have been targeted, when you talk about hospitals and educational institutions, when you talk about communities where people have known as their home, and you are targeting those areas, and you're being very deliberate about that, albeit saying that, the Hamas are kind of hiding out in these places. When you're being deliberate like that and not thoughtful enough to say, wait a minute, we have some civilian lives there, then you are now moving into the space that it becomes genocidal. And so, yes, ceasefire indeed is needed. The freeing of however many hostages may remain. But at some point, and I don't want to sound religious here, but at some point, we have to learn to study war no more. Just as Daddy challenged us to study nonviolence, we got to learn to study war no more, so that these kind of genocidal acts do not happen, so that we have the heart and the skill and the courage and the strength to create the kind of societies where terrorism has no place to really grow. And so, so that we get into this cycle now of saying, well, we got to get rid of these terrorists. Well, no, in order to get rid of terrorism, in order to get rid of violence, you can't do it, with violence. You have to do it with a whole nother spirit and mindset. And so that's what I think we have to begin to think about in this nation and world. I'm always asking people the question, what kind of world do you want to live in? It has to start there, because I think we've accepted violence, as normal. We've accepted war as it has to be. What else can we do? And Dr. King gave us answers. He gave us a blueprint. He gave us a way. And he showed us that a human being, because he was not superhuman, a human being can stand on the side of what's right and what's just, and be willing to take whatever criticisms or hit that you have to take and go the nonviolent way to transform our society. We can do it. He did it. We can do it. So I don't want to go further because I'll say too much.
But Dr. King, to your point, when we start thinking about studying war no more, that's one of the songs we sung growing up in church. I don't know about anybody else's faith experiences, but we would sing, I'm going to lay down my burdens down by the riverside. I ain't going to study war no more. That has a different connotation to me today. As I think about the causes of militarism and the causes of wars, we look at Gaza, Israel, and Sudan and Congo, and maybe thinking about why Sudan and Congo aren't as prevalent in mainstream media as Ukraine, as Gaza. Ukraine suffering today great losses. Sudan, Congo, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Tigray, all over the world, in the United States included, militarism, war. As your father said, Dr. King, wars are poor chisels for carving out peaceful tomorrows. We think they are. There's an illusion that we can get to peace through war, but it's actually not possible. Dr. Reverend Wilson Hartgrove, what are your thoughts on where war comes from as we're looking at this landscape and everything that's happening in our world? What leads us to this fascination and this idea that militarism is a solution?
Well, I think we all have to be honest enough to acknowledge that violence is right there in the human heart. It's in each of us. And whenever we talk about, the need to find ways to restrain violence and to find this creative alternative that Dr. King was just talking about, we have to take seriously, the victims of violence. I like you all have said that we must work for a ceasefire in Gaza and in Sudan and in other places in this world. That's a moral obligation for people who are committed to just humanity. And if, like me, you're committed to following Jesus, it's absolutely necessary. And we can't forget the victims of violence sort of on the other side. We can't forget the people, family members who still have hostages taken by Hamas. I mean, there's horrible, horrible violence at the root of this, which is why I so deeply respect and just want to acknowledge you, Dr. King, in your commitment to this, because your family has suffered violence, more directly than maybe any family in this country. And Reverend Barber and I just published a book called White Poverty, and when we were writing it, we were telling the story of the Poor People's Campaign, and so went back. And for me, it was a powerful experience to go back and to listen to your mother at the Solidarity Day of the Poor People's Campaign gathering in 1968, because it deeply struck me the way she was still grieving, the direct violence that you all had suffered when your father was assassinated, and all that went with that. I mean, the threats that were still very present for everyone in that moment, and how she went and first sang. I went back and listened to her sing, "Come by here, Lord, come by here. Somebody's hurting. Come by here." And in her grief, that ability to connect with the hurting of all those people who were gathered, and to then go on and say, as someone who had so publicly experienced violence, she said, a starving child is violence. Not addressing poverty is violence. She made these connections about the systemic violence that's at the root of so much of injustice in our world, and was able in her grief to connect with all those people. I think that's a fundamental basis for our commitment to be peacemakers in the world. We got to recognize, this human problem is in all of us, which means we can't write off anybody. If we're going to be committed to our own transformation and pursuit of beloved community, we have to be willing to engage and to do it in suffering love, which she obviously was willing to do. You've been willing to do. I mean, those are the kinds of examples we look to. So I just think about this past weekend. We just remembered the life of Reverend James Lawson and his, incredible witness in this country. I've read where your father said, whenever he was teaching nonviolence, he wanted to be there. He wanted to be on the front row listening. This person who taught so many in the movement, the practice of nonviolence. I was, privileged to get to sit with him myself. And, it just seems to me that his emphasis over and over and over again for decades was to say that in the 20th century, there was, of course, the discovery of the power of the atom and the incredible danger that unleashed with the potential for nuclear weapons that can destroy the world. Right. But equally powerful was the discovery of the practice of nonviolence and the way that can unleash the human potentials for transformation without violence. I mean, that is a revolutionary thing in the history of the world, and that people put it into practice in Gandhi's experiments, in what the civil rights movement was able to do here in this country, and the way that has spread around the world, in no small part thanks to your work at the King Center. That's an incredible gift to the world. And I think we have to do everything we can in the face of so much violence that's consuming so many precious lives to cultivate that gift and to invite people into it and to say, we can't give up. This is still a possibility.
I wanted to add something to what you're saying too, and that is, I don't think people truly stop to think about the cost of violence, war, not just financially, but the moral cost, the generational cost. And so, I was doing a little bit of research, and it kind of revealed that oftentimes when that point is not highlighted enough before, individuals who are in these decision-making places, then it can cause things to go awry. But there are a lot of, what we don't realize, there are a lot of potential wars and acts of violence that didn't happen because individuals had that realization. And so we've got to figure out how to cultivate the higher sense of who we are in the world, so that we'll begin to choose the pathway of peace and the pathway of redemption and reconciliation, and the creation of the beloved community. But when I look at what's happening all over the world, and I think about all of this stuff, and I hate to simplify it this way, but for me, a lot of times it's easier to start, and it's not necessarily simple. But if you think about it, the Bible tells us, and I'm not trying again to be religious or Christian, but just coming from my own faith tradition, in Deuteronomy, I've set before you today life and death. Choose life. Every day we have the capacity in humanity, in decision-making places, to choose life. Is it easy? No. But it's doable. We've had examples of people doing it. We have examples of people every day doing it, choosing the pathway of life that values the sacredness of all human life in the decision-making when it comes to these difficult things happening in global conflicts. There's a deficit, if you ask me, there's a deficit of love for humanity in our world. When your love is displaced, then you can easily overlook another person and exploit and oppress, and take advantage of and destroy and kill. But when you have a love for humanity, you can't do that. There's a check mark. Oh, can't go that route. I got to tap into something higher in me. So we've got to call people up into who God created us to be, because we have the capacity within us to love. As we open our hearts to the God or the greatest source of love in this universe, we have the capacity to overcome the decisions that we are making that are destructive. We can make constructive decisions. We can create constructive environments. There's enough resources in this world that we don't have to do land grabs. There's enough space in our human conscience to manage, to balance our diversity. We don't have to agree, but we can still love each other. So anyway, I just wanted to add that bit to the conversation.
And among the many things you both have mentioned, there's this idea that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about with the World House, that all of life is interconnected. We are all interrelated together, and we need each other. And I cannot be all that I can be unless you are all that you ought to be. And when we think about that and all the truth that you're laying out for us, and Dr. King, I would love for you to start with this portion. Why is it then, with all of that being understood, and even just the economic and moral reasons that we're talking about, why is it that war and large-scale militaristic violence is the default setting? Even with all that being true, and we know that, why is it that war is like the default setting for how we handle conflict? And then how would you suggest that we start to rethink our approach to large-scale problem solving?
Well, it's the economics to me. It's follow the money. Love of money is the root of all evil. This is a business. Military weapons. People are making a lot of money off of the production of and the distribution of those weapons around the world. And once I invest like that, I gotta get my return, unfortunately. And that goes back to what we value. Daddy talked about the revolution of values in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos Community, that was published 1 year before his assassination. And so, I think until we, again, readjust our mindset, and there's propaganda, the loudest messaging is coming from those who help to undergird and advance, the agenda of those who are seeking to financially benefit, unfortunately, which is a horrible notion, off of the loss and destruction of human lives and civilizations. Because look, there's more money. I can go in and rebuild a society, all those contracts. I mean, you got to think about all of this. And so there has to be a critical mass of us who elevate a new narrative. We have to resound very loudly, that there are, as my brother said, creative alternatives to what is happening. And we got to expose what's going on and not be afraid to expose it. I think that's why my father was assassinated. He exposed what was happening between Vietnam and what was not happening in the United States of America in terms of how we allocated our resources. And so, again, it's going to take a concerted effort to cultivate in people this new way. We are reinforcing violence in our society, that's the only way to solve and address conflicts and problems, and if need be, going to war. We've accepted that. And what makes it the most difficult, and I know this is touchy, and I won't go too far with this, but what makes it most difficult for most of us is we have loved ones who serve, in the military. And so sometimes it feels weird and awkward, because my father was asked that question in an interview, about what are you saying to these soldiers, giving their lives. And my father deeply valued the soldiers, and that's why he was speaking about it. Because I don't think anybody wakes up, let me say this, few people wake up every day saying, I want to go destroy human life. And so, it is difficult when you have people who are in these, different areas of our armed services to really speak very strongly in this way, because you don't want them to feel like what they're doing is not a service to humanity. So we got to balance and figure that out as well.
Reverend Hartgrove, before you answer, I want to add just if you could consider this in your answer, just the real descending spiral, because what Dr. King just described to me reminds me is the descending spiral is real. When I hear from my Jewish neighbors, what I'm hearing is people who've gone through an atrocity. When I hear from my Palestinian neighbors, I'm hearing from people who have endured atrocity. I have endured violence for a number of years. When you look at Sudan and Congo, of course, King Leopold coming in, enslaving people. Mm-hmm. We have in these instances the horrors of slavery, war, Holocaust, all these different things that have happened. How does that contribute as you consider your answer to the question that Dr. King was just responding to? Because I'm finding that anytime a people group has been gravely harmed, there's a need for self-protection. And sometimes that self-protection can look like other people being harmed, when actually that just adds to the descending spiral. Right. So how do we deal with this outcome of that's war when people have been hurt deeply? How do we repair the breach? That's an organization that you're involved in.
Well, you're absolutely right. This is a spiral, and it's a cycle that repeats itself over and over. And it repeats itself because every person who experiences violence internalizes that violence and is processing it. And of course, the promise of nonviolence is a way out, right? The gift of being able to respond to violence with something else. That's what Gandhi called ahimsa. That's the power that reaches down into some new space and finds a creative alternative in response. But in some ways, I was thinking as Dr. King was speaking that we have to find a way to name how the violence has impacted all of us. And so when you were talking about people who've served in the military, it struck me that one thing we can learn from listening to people who've served in the U.S. military in recent decades is this whole category of moral injury. People who have been asked by their government to do things that they know from their own moral center is wrong, experience a kind of internal violence. Now, psychologists are careful to say, this is not the same thing as trauma. People who directly experience violence have trauma and post-traumatic stress and things that are related to that. I mean, the body processes trauma in a particular way, but moral injury is a serious reality that those of us who have been part of a nation and part of communities that have sort of included us in violence without, without asking. I think we have to seriously consider how this has impacted us. And this has been part of my own journey. I grew up in the Baptist church in the South with, pale-skinned folks like myself who have been told for generations that we were white. But I grew up, in the sort of post-racial era where we weren't talking so much in those terms anymore. As I've come to understand it, there were forces in this country that wanted to maintain power, that decided very intentionally to not use race to divide people anymore, but to begin using our religion. So as what we now call Christian nationalism developed organizations that were reaching out to people, they began to message communities like the one where I grew up to tell us that our Christianity and our commitment to country above all else was, they were closely intertwined. It was a sort of interweaving of a religious identity with a particular understanding of patriotism, one that was often very militaristic. And so in my own experience, when the United States went to war in 2003, over and against the advice of all Christian theologians who said it would be an unjust war, and over and against most of the nations of the world that opposed it at the UN and other places, I found myself in a situation where I had to begin to wrestle with, what does it mean that I am a citizen of a country and a member of a church that blesses and sanctions wars that most people see as unjust? And I, to go back to what I've learned from veterans, I think there's a moral injury entailed in that, right? And that coming to terms with, what it means to be a faithful citizen, to be a faithful Christian, to be a just honest human being means grappling with that moral injury and saying, there's a way that someone like me has to be healed from that. But I have to intentionally face the reality of, what my country has done and what has been done in my name, and begin to make real amends, right? Begin to develop relationships that help me understand that there are other perspectives. I mean, I am an American. I was born here. This is my nationality, but I'm a Christian, which means I have sisters and brothers all over the world. And I need to be listening to them, listening to their experience. Certainly over these past months, listening to Christians from the West Bank and from Gaza has been incredibly important.
And Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., as Dr. Bernice King, CEO of the King Center, referenced earlier, he said, a true revolution of values will lay hands on the world and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And so, Dr. King, what are some nonviolent methods of protest or other direct actions that we can deploy to help our leaders, even here in America and abroad, to end their pursuit of unjust war?
Well, I think in the first place, we have to understand from a Kingian perspective, Nonviolence 365, direct action has to be seen and understood in a greater context. It was part of a larger strategy and process. And oftentimes I think we are lacking the strategy to give the necessary pressure and create the kind of tension that is needed to raise or at least prick the conscience of individuals. If it may not reach those who are in the actual role of making the decision, it could reach those who are kind of on the sideline and can be brought in and become an advocate for getting the attention, may have direct access to those who are in decision making. And so, you know, I don't want to push the issue of let's just protest, because if it doesn't have its proper organization around it, it's not going to achieve the outcome of getting people to really hear. Now, sometimes people feel that violence, some form of protest that has a little bit of violence, can get people's attention. And sometimes from an immediate standpoint, it might have that effect. But nonviolence is a long-term sustainable solution to what we are talking about when speaking of war. So, you know, when I was a college student, I was a part of the South African, the movement, addressing apartheid in South Africa. And as students, we were part of the greater strategy that had been developed around, at this particular stage when I became involved, it had moved to putting pressure on those corporations who were doing business in South Africa. So it was very targeted towards certain industries in terms of boycotting and protesting and putting yourself on the line to raise awareness of the citizenry of what's going on, and that we have to get the attention of our nation to not continue to support that, not just from a governmental or political perspective, but from a corporate perspective. And so, but it was very organized. And eventually we know it became a part of the effectiveness, because the whole world began to participate in it. And so nonviolence has to be organized for it to be effective.
Yeah, that's very important. And I would add to that one of the things that I've learned over the years is that for nonviolence to be a real way forward and a way toward the world that we want, its organization has to be not just something that's sort of relegated to, you know, the kind of issue-based stuff we do out in public, but that nonviolence really is a way of life. So if we're going to practice it well in our strategic attempts to interrupt the violence, you know, that's happening very publicly that we see, you know, in other parts of the world or in our neighborhoods, then we also have to be about practicing it every day in our homes, in the way we raise children, in the way we treat partners. You know, these are critical issues. It makes me think of Gandhi's practice over the years of the ashram, and you know, Gandhi as a man of some privilege who had grown up, you know, in Indian society, understood his washing of the toilets in the ashram as an interruption of the structural violence that he was habituated in at home. You know, there were all sorts of things that needed to be done on a daily basis in order to sort of get ourselves out of the habits of our culture that we've simply inherited. So yeah, the practices of nonviolence are really about how we treat one another in every context of our lives.
Yes.
And then when we move into public issues, we should be very strategic about it. And everything that you're saying about the need to build campaigns and, you know, to have the negotiations in a campaign before we move to that step of direct action. But, you know, in between, before the direct action, to take seriously as a community of people who are going to do it, the spiritual preparation. I mean, I learned from Uncle Vincent Harding and many others that you know, the lunch counter protests were planned for, especially in Nashville, for months in practice, where people, you know, people did what they were going to do, you know, in practice, and there were people who realized that they just couldn't maintain discipline. And so they took other jobs. They didn't sit on the stool. They were runners. They were runners
Right.
taking messages. They were doing other things. And that's critical work to put in that time in order to prepare for effective nonviolent campaigns.
Based on what the two of you just shared, and thank you, there's a need for preparation and for understanding that it's a soul force that we're bringing to bear as we confront injustice. Dr. King called it a soul force. He said we're going to meet this physical force with soul force. How do you do that when it's urgent? As we close out, this conversation, we want to think about the fact that it's airing on Be Love Day 2024. And love is often considered to be just weak and sentimental. But Dr. King said it organizes itself into powerful direct action. And one of your favorite quotes, Dr. Bernie said, King, is your father saying that justice at its best is love concretized. So what do we do with love in this urgent hour to bring it to bear as we confront militarism and poverty and racism, but in particular, militarism? As students protest across this nation, they feel like we got to do something now. And we do. People are losing lives at not even losing lives, their lives are being taken egregiously at an alarming rate. There's an estimate that in the rubble in Gaza, there are over 20,000 children that are not in the number that's being shared for children who are dead, but just in the rubble, some of them still living. As people feel that pressure, of we got to do something, how do we hear each other at the same time that we're doing something and not cause our community to disintegrate even more? How can love help us do that? How can love help us listen at the same time that we're engaged in direct action? How can it help us balance and get to the place where we say we got to stop this loss of life, these deaths, but at the same time, I don't want to keep harming people? And that's, as Dr. King, Reverend Hartgrove, how do we get to principle 3 of nonviolence, where we want to destroy this evil of militarism using love, while at the same time still engaging each other with dignity and with respect? How can love help us?
Takes me back to the urgency of my own student experience and what I was talking about earlier in terms of the war making in Iraq. That was happening when I was a college student. And I'll never forget one of my mentors in nonviolence, Father Dan Berrigan, came to Philadelphia to visit with those of us who were deeply concerned. And he listened and he said, sometimes it's important to remember, don't just do something, stand there for a minute. We often say, don't just stand there, do something. He turned it around. He said, don't just do something, stand here and take a moment to pay attention. What I heard in that was a real call to recognize where I was connected to this violence. And for me, it was deeply connected to my own faith and the way my faith was being used by the President of the United States at the time and others, who called themselves evangelical Christians, to justify war making in another part of the world. And I had to grapple with that. And I had to come to terms with, okay, what can I do as a person of faith to begin to unlearn this violence? And in that context, I prayed about it. I do believe that Oscar Romero from among the Communion of Saints intervened and helped me to discern this. And my wife, Leah, and I went to Iraq. We joined a group called the Christian Peacemaker Teams that were going to be in Iraq while the bombs were falling. We said, we've got to be there. We've got to go and be with the people who are suffering. And it was in that context that I came to understand from people on the ground in Iraq that the practice of nonviolence might not end the war tomorrow, but it had to entail our solidarity with the people who were suffering in concrete ways. And from them and with them, we could learn to hope for a better future. I think at some point, what I heard in Father Dan Berrigan's words was you got to pause and pay attention and to come to understand where you are connected to the violence and how you can begin to practice nonviolence in that space. So that's been my own discernment.
So in addition to what he's just shared, I think there's something that my father left with us as a ongoing challenge, and that is learning how to live together as brothers and sisters, so we don't perish together as fools, or as he said in one instance, so we're not forced to perish together as fools. I think, the urgency of do has to be combined with the study of what to do. Oftentimes we can move in a kind of knee-jerk reaction to things, or even go into things with the heart and the mind that I know exactly what is needed, because maybe we are nonviolent practitioners. But my father was very contemplative. I think he was always studying what he was doing, analyzing it, seeking to come up with ways to better refine what was taking place and what was needed. And so I would couple it with everything that he's saying. We have to be present. Love has to show up. It can't just be confined in four walls, but it has to show up. But it has to show up in this kind of learning, constant learning mode, and making sure that you are constantly aligned with the spirit and the heart of love. So that whole third step of nonviolence, personal commitment, or as they called back then, self-purification, has to remain with you throughout the entire process, because it's very easy, in the midst of things, to turn, to shift, to lose it, and end up becoming like those that you are, seeking to address the injustice that's coming from them. So I think that's so important to this work and to what we're talking about with love. Be love is a constant. It's not past tense. It's not future tense. It just is. And all we have is now. So in every instance, everything that's required to be love, which is that purification, which is that continuing to try to understand, learning how to live together. How do we address these injustices and still, create an atmosphere for the person who right now is adversarial, but yet creating that atmosphere so that they even begin to understand that they're part of our greater humanity, that we're interconnected, that we're interrelated, that we're interdependent, that we're part of each other, that we're part of the human family.
Yeah, and if we want to be part of a movement that is challenging the kinds of retributive justice that we see, on the world stage, that seems so counterproductive and destructive, there's certainly, public advocacy to do on those issues, but you can also practice restorative justice at home, right? I mean, if we really believe that love is the answer, then there's a whole lot of people in our communities who are being thrown away because often they've, engaged in some fairly minor infraction. And to begin to say, well, let's address these issues in our communities and try to find a way to heal the harms that have been done. If we really want that on the world stage, we got to figure out how to practice that in our communities. So doing that with, with folks who are having disputes in your neighborhood, on your block, at your courthouse downtown, is a way to be love, as we continue to hope and believe that we can find ways to do that on the world stage.
And so can I just add this as we close? what he just said and what he has said before is so essential. If there are enough of us who practice nonviolence on a daily basis, in whatever situation, circumstance we are in, whatever relational situation, circumstance that we're in, it will spill over into all of these other difficult and complex social issues that we're addressing, because it then becomes infectious, you know, and it spreads. And then we bring that whole spirit, you know, to the work and the movement to resist and overcome the injustices and inhumanities that are occurring in our world.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Wilson Hartgrove, Dr. Bernice A. King. As we close, let's give some thoughts, some final thoughts, and then Cameron's going to come and close out this episode. I think all over the world right now, people are mourning, considering, grieving the different ways that we are killing each other globally. And so there are people in Sudan now who are suffering, Haiti, because of the exacerbation of violence with handguns and automatic weapons, Congo, Cameroon, the United States. We don't want to leave the United States out. As Dr. King called the United States of America, the government of the United States, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And even internally, violence is happening here in various forms on a daily basis, including militaristically. And Gaza, as we look at and remember our neighbors who are in the rubble, our neighbors who every day are facing bombing, as we remember our neighbors who had loved ones taken hostage on October 7th, as we remember those who are unjustly imprisoned by Israel. We remember what Dr. Bernice King just said about how terror forms and how we can cultivate a culture across the world where we end terrorism. I want to share this prayer from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from a book called Thou Dear God. And as I just want us to hear it as we think about our direct action, how love can show up as the most durable power in the world, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called it, and what we can do now, as Reverend Wilson Hartgrove and Dr. Bernice A. King just shared, that combination of direct action and study of how to implement nonviolent direct action at the same time, understanding the urgency, but also understanding not just doing something, but doing something effective and that's love-centered and is not destructive, destroying humanity at the same time as we're saying we're doing something to help humanity. Dr. King said, God grant that right here in America and all over the world, we will choose the highway, a way in which all the nations of the world will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, a way in which every nation will allow justice to run down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Amen.
Dr. West, thank you so much for that. And what a tremendous way to close out this incredibly important conversation. And you all, if you're watching this on Be Love Day, these are the kind of conversations that we are going to be having on the Rethink podcast in season 3. And if you learn from what you heard today, please make sure that you share, that you like, that you subscribe to the channel. We want to continue to get more and more people involved in the conversation the King Center is having, and we want your voice as well. So please leave your comments. Let us know what your thoughts are on this conversation. If you're listening to this on the audio side, make sure you give us a 5-star review. Make sure you tell people about where they can get the tools they need to engage with their community and the global community at large. Again, I am Cameron Friend, host of the Rethink podcast. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. See you soon.